SABC News Channel viewers, let's take a look at how global factors influence our economy in South Africa. I'm joined by Lukman Otunuga. He's a research analyst at FXTM. Thanks so much for your time. Let's talk about what South Africa will be, how investors, will be looking at South Africa and what kind of data they're expecting this week.
Thank you very much for having me here today. Yes, we've got a couple of economic data from South Africa this week. There'll be much attention towards the trade balance because we know that South Africa is an open economy and a third of GDP comes from exports. So if we have a situation where there's still a trade deficit, this could suggest that ongoing US-China trade developments are negatively impacting demand for South African products.
With that US-China trade tensions, how badly does it affect the South African economy?
It's quite significant when we keep in mind when two elephants are fighting, bystanders will always be under threat, and this is with South Africa. With China having a strong relationship with South Africa, naturally, if trade tensions between the two largest economies in the world result in slowing global growth, this will result back to South Africa and impact the rand.
Okay. We also know that the United States is possibly threatening Europe and the Eurozone with tariffs as well. How possible is that, is an escalation there, and how will that affect us if that escalation does take place and they do start slapping tariffs there?
Naturally, this is a hidden risk that investors need to pay very close attention to, because many people are saying after Donald Trump is finished with China, Europe is the next target. When we consider the situation Europe is in, the fact that Germany is facing headwinds, we have drama in Italy, we have Brexit negatively impacting the Eurozone, should Donald Trump start to target EU, this could cause a ripple effect across global markets, which will naturally negatively impact emerging markets like South Africa.
And then what about a country like Iran, which you would assume perhaps there wouldn't be as much of an impact if they have tensions with the United States?
So we're following the latest news with Donald Trump imposing sanctions on Iran. Naturally, this is important news to oil prices, and we know how oil prices impact the South African economy. Higher oil prices would lead to higher petrol prices, rising inflation. Everyone feels the heat. But my take on this is, when we're looking at oil prices in general, geopolitical factors are pushing oil prices higher. But looking at oil prices, it's like trying to use diesel to top up a petrol car. Prices are going to go higher, but it's only going to be to a certain extent. We have the OPEC meeting next month. Although OPEC members are likely to extend production cuts, this is unlikely to push oil prices higher, because the main factor that I'm looking for to support oil prices is a rise in demand, which goes back to ongoing US-China trade tensions.
We know that the G20 meetings are taking place this week, and I know that we've been focusing a lot on what's going to happen on the sidelines, that meeting between Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping. What else can we expect from the G20 meetings? There's
a lot of expectations as we go towards the G20 meeting. If you look at the market mood in general as well, everyone's sitting on their hands, investors are on standby, because there is optimism that both sides are going to secure some sort of deal. But how many times have we seen investors or markets be quite excited over something only for things to fall apart in the last moment? What I'm looking for is a situation where the United States and China probably restart trade talks. So this situation will still keep markets cautious and will allow major central banks to still come to the rescue to attempt to counter global slowdown.
Let's come back to South Africa now. There's concern over Moodys and their pronouncement on South Africa's rating.
Yeah, that's something I've been paying very, very close attention to. So concerns are now elevated of a situation where Moodys can actually grade South Africa's rating to junk. Now, this would be very significant for the South African economy, because if such becomes reality, we could see a situation where billions leave the economy. Now, this is the last thing South Africa needs right now, considering how, when we look at first quarter growth, it was quite disappointing. And the country is still exposed to many domestic headwinds. However, it's not fair to isolate South Africa. It's not only South Africa facing headwinds. If you look at other nations in Africa, if you look at developed nations, we could actually see what the impacts of global trade tensions have done all across the board.
What kind of factors would Moodys be taking into account when they look at South Africa?
So the factors Moodys, of course, will be looking at will be an improvement in hard data. Like when we looked at GDP for first quarter, we saw there was a sharp drop in manufacturing, in mining, and agriculture. So if there's a rebound in this could be quite supportive. But important factor I'm looking at is the Central Bank of South Africa. So there are talks of a potential rate cut. I feel that for the Central Bank of South Africa to cut rates, it will be contingent on what the Federal Reserve does. So once the Fed moves forward to cutting rates, the SAB may cut rates as well in an effort to boost consumption, because we know how important consumption is part of the South African economy.
Talk to us about that. What happens when an interest rate cuts for South Africans who are ordinary South Africans, consumers?
So naturally, when an interest rate cut, when there's a cut in interest rates, this would support consumption. This would allow, businesses to invest, to spend more. It will support employment, and it will even encourage consumers to spend.
When we speak about the credit rating, there has always been that warning, even when there's discussions around the central bank and how politicians act and what they say about ensuring that we don't get downgraded to junk status. What if the worst happens? How long would it take South Africa to recover, and what would they need to do in order to recover?
So hypothetically, if we do have
worst case
scenario, a situation where the credit rating is downgraded to a junk and US-China trade tensions intensify, the South African rand could drop as much as 4 to 5%. So this is very, very significant. And as I said, this is the last thing South Africa needs right now, considering how the nation is trying to fix itself from the domestic and external headwinds.
How much of an effect do policy decisions and contested policy decisions have on how not just Moodys but other credit ratings agencies view South Africa?
Of course, naturally, these decisions do have an impact, but going back to what I was saying earlier, I'm more focusing on the external drivers impacting the South African economy.
Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Lukman Otunuga, he's a research analyst at FXTM, joining me in studio there to talk about how global factors affect the South African economy.